You are 20 years old when Bedford, Virginia stops being the town you grew up in and becomes a name that will be read in newspapers across the country for a reason nobody there ever wanted. Until this morning, you have spent your whole life inside a place small enough that everyone in your company grew up 2 streets or 2 farms from each other. You did not enlist into this war as a stranger among strangers. You enlisted into a unit already full of your own neighbors. Before any of this, your days in Bedford were built around small, specific things. You worked the counter at your father's hardware store on Main Street, learned to count out nails by the pound before you learned to shave. Your mother kept a Sunday dinner going, whether or not the whole family made it home in time. Bedford is the kind of town where the National Guard Armory sits 2 blocks from the courthouse, and where joining Company A was less a decision than something that simply happened to boys your age, the way growing a few more inches happens. Your father served in the First War briefly and rarely speaks of it. The one thing he has told you more than once is this: a uniform doesn't make the waiting any easier for the people at home. Write your mother more than you think you need to. You think this is simple advice. You do not yet understand that for a town the size of Bedford, every single letter home will matter more than you can imagine. Your closest friend in the company is Daniel, a boy you have known since before either of you could properly spell your own last names. Daniel is a fast talker, the kind of soldier who can make a sergeant laugh mid inspection without ever quite getting written up for it. Where you tend to go quiet under pressure, Daniel fills silence without thinking about it. In training, this makes him good for morale. You do not yet know it will also make the silence after him unbearable. Company A trains for years before it ever sees real combat, first as Virginia National Guard, then federalized, then shipped to England to wait. During the longest stretches of waiting, you and Daniel take turns writing letters home that are almost entirely lies of omission, not false, just smaller than the truth, trimmed down to whatever will not frighten your mothers. Daniel jokes that a Bedford Boys letter home has 2 versions: what he writes and what he actually means. You do not think much of the joke at the time. By late May of 1944, the waiting changes shape. Extra ammunition, extra rations, maps you are shown once and never allowed to keep. Your company commander tells you only that you are part of the first wave of the largest invasion force ever assembled, and that your objective is a beach in Normandy the planners have codenamed Omaha. Nobody tells you exactly what is waiting on the other side of that beach, because at this point, nobody planning the invasion is entirely sure either. Your commanding officer is not a man given to speeches. He runs drills longer than anyone wants, checks equipment twice when once would do, and says almost nothing about what is coming. You resent the extra hours at the time. Only later will you understand that the man responsible for this many hometown boys in one company has more reason than most to try to control what little he still can. The invasion is supposed to launch on June 5th. A storm across the channel delays it by a full day. Just enough time for every man aboard the transport ships to sit with his own thoughts longer than any of them would have chosen to. Daniel spends the extra day rewriting his letter home 3 times. You ask him why. He says the real version keeps changing, depending on how brave he feels when he picks up the pencil. Before you board the landing craft, Daniel presses a folded letter into your jacket pocket, not his own. A spare he's written to his mother in case something happens to him before he can send it himself. He asks you to carry it, not because he expects to need it, but because a man feels less like a target if someone else is holding his last words instead of him. You take it without really thinking about what you are agreeing to. At 5:30 in the morning on June 6th, your landing craft is lowered into a channel churned rough enough that men are sick over the sides before the ramp has even dropped. Somewhere behind you, the amphibious tanks that were supposed to reach the beach ahead of you and give you cover are launching into the same violent swells. You do not know yet that most of them will never make it to shore at all. As the boat closes on the beach, the noise changes from distant to immediate. Not artillery in the abstract anymore, but rounds striking the metal ramp in front of you hard enough to feel through your boots. Through the gap at the top of the ramp, you catch a flash of sand still clean, still empty of the chaos you were told to expect, and for one useless second you let yourself hope the briefings were wrong in your favor. They were not. The ramp drops, and the world in front of you is nothing like a rehearsal. There is no cover because the tanks that were supposed to provide it are sitting on the floor of the channel. There is no softened ground because the bombers meant to hit the bluffs overshot inland by miles. You go into water over your waist under fire from positions that were supposed to have already been destroyed, and the boy beside you, not Daniel, someone else from your boat, goes down before either of you reaches dry sand. You do not stop. You are not sure, later, how you managed not to. You do not see exactly what happens to Daniel. You know only that somewhere in the 10 minutes it takes for your boat's section of the beach to go from a landing to a slaughter, the version of the morning where you find him again on the sand simply does not happen. You reach the seawall at the base of the bluff with men you recognize and men you do not, and Daniel is not among either group. You do not have time to look for him. You are not sure, if you are honest with yourself, that looking would have changed anything. By the time reinforcements finally push inland later that day, the beach behind you is littered with wreckage that used to be equipment and men who used to be your neighbors. You survive June 6th. So do some others from Bedford. 19 do not. A number that will not mean anything to you personally until weeks later when you learn exactly which 19 and understand that you have known every single one of their families since before you could walk. You carry Daniel's letter for the rest of the war without delivering it, the same way you carried it onto the boat, not quite able to hand it over, not quite able to throw it away. When you finally return to Bedford after Germany surrenders, the town does not look destroyed the way the beaches did. It looks smaller, quieter. A town of 3,000 people does not have enough houses for 19 absences to go unnoticed in any of them. You deliver Daniel's letter to his mother the same week you come home, because by then you have already learned what happens when a man waits too long to hand over the truth he is carrying. She reads it standing in her own doorway. You do not tell her it was quick or painless, or anything you cannot actually promise. You tell her only that he asked you to make sure she got his real words, not the shortened version he used to send home to spare her. It is not comfort exactly. It is the only honest thing you have to give her. You spend the rest of your life in a town that never entirely stops being defined by one 10-minute stretch of one morning in 1944. Decades later, the United States chooses Bedford, your Bedford, population barely larger than it was the day you all shipped out Ekumwambwen, as the site of the National D-Day Memorial because per capita, no American community lost more that day than yours did. You attend the dedication as an old man, standing among names carved in stone that you knew first as boys, who worked the tobacco fields and swept the floor of your father's store. The monument does not explain what it felt like in the water that morning. It only insists permanently in granite that it happened, and that these specific, ordinary young men were the ones it happened to. That is the part you realize standing there that Daniel would have wanted delivered more than anything else. Not the heroism, just the fact of who they actually were, kept from being reduced to a single paragraph in someone else's version of the story,